In the wake of the Democratic takeover of the state government of Virginia, lawmakers immediately turned their attention towards firearms ownership in this state. They have initiated the process by which they aim to pass a slew of legislation, the most notorious of which has been Senate Bill 16. This bill effectively redefines the term assault weapon to include virtually any firearm that can accept a detachable magazine, including many pistols, as well as making the sale, transfer, and possession of such items a felony, and making the sale, transfer, and possession of any firearm magazines that have the capacity to hold in excess of 10 rounds a Class 1 misdemeanor. Despite claims that the bills proposed for the year of 2020 are nothing more than modest gun control measures, the introduction of these bills have galvanized Virginia residents. As of the 14th of January, 91 counties, 14 cities, and 29 towns in the state have passed what are called Second Amendment sanctuaries, largely symbolic resolutions that express the local residents' opposition to these new laws. On January 13th, Senate Bill 16 was removed from the current legislature's agenda, as its originator, Senator Saslaw, has chosen to strike his own bill. There is only one logical explanation for this. He has done so in response to the severe backlash from communities across the Commonwealth. Despite this, restrictive gun control is still the agenda of the General Assembly, as 4 other measures have been approved and are now to be considered by the sum of the legislative body. The 4 laws that have been approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee are Senate Bill 35, Senate Bill 69, Senate Bill 70, and Senate Bill 240. Senate Bill 35 makes carrying a firearm at a permitted public event illegal. Senate Bill 69 imposes a 1 handgun per month limit, making multiple purchases a Class 1 misdemeanor. Senate Bill 70 requires a background check for any firearm transfer with the exception of a transfer between immediate family members, a transfer that occurs by operation of law, a transfer carried out by the executor or administrator of an estate as part of a buyback program of antique firearms, and several other minor exceptions. Senate Bill 240 allows attorneys and law enforcement officers to petition a judge to order the removal of firearms from someone's home. These proposed pieces of legislation are both illegal and immoral. They run counter to both the text and the spirit of the Constitution, constituting nothing more than a blatant attempt on our enshrined civil liberties. They run counter to reason, seeking to impose upon the people of Virginia unjust laws that are nothing more than an attempt to deny us our birthright, the right to live peacefully, unmolested. Senate Bill 35 is an infringement upon the freedom of assembly, as well as the right to keep and bear arms. It seeks to deny groups of individuals gathered for political purposes the right to arm themselves in their own defense against hostile actors. Senate Bill 69 imposes an arbitrary restriction and delay on the ownership of guns. It is an infringement on the right to keep arms. Senate Bill 70 is formidable to constitutional rights if one is to take the same position that Martin Luther King Jr. took. A right delayed is a right denied, and this is precisely what Senate Bill 70 seeks to do. It grants the Department of State Police 3 days to complete a criminal history record information check before a firearm can be transferred, essentially forcing citizens to wait in line before they are to exercise their rights. This is antithetical to the intent of the entirety of the Bill of Rights. If you were required to wait 3 business days before being granted permission to open your mouth and speak, it would be just as much of infringement of your rights as this proposed law. This law may not run counter to the text of the Constitution, but it certainly perverts its spirit. The most disconcerting of these 4 Senate bills is Senate Bill 240, which violates the First, Second, Fourth, and 14th Amendment rights. The 14th Amendment clearly states that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Senate Bill 240 seeks to abridge not merely privileges and immunities, but fundamental rights of the citizenry. Senate Bill 240 is not only intended to be a means by which property is to be stolen from innocents who have committed no crime, it is a means by which their right to defend life and liberty are to be thwarted as well. The Fourth Amendment establishes that no warrant shall be issued for unreasonable searches and seizures that are without probable cause. Extreme risk protective orders are specifically designed to grant law enforcement officers authority to strip an individual who has not committed any crime of their firearms. There is no valid assessment of any probable cause, as there can be no reasonable basis for believing that a crime is in commission, as gun ownership is legal. There is no objective standard by which individuals whose civil liberties are trampled under this pretext are at an elevated risk of harming themselves or others. It is merely based upon entirely subjective perception of potential danger. The Second Amendment reads as follows: "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed." And who is the militia? If the men who fathered our nation are to be believed, the militia is the people themselves. Americans have the right and advantage of being armed, unlike the citizens of other countries whose governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. James Madison. I ask, who are the militia? They consist now of the whole people, except a few public officers. George Mason. The Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States, who are peaceable citizens, from keeping their own arms. Samuel Adams. The list goes on. Any intellectually honest analysis of the overall opinions of the founders will show a result indicating that the general sentiment of these men was that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was crafted such as to ensure to the individual the right to keep and bear arms. Now, if you are unable to grasp the simple fact that Senate Bill 240, as well as all of the other proposed legislation aforementioned, are infringements upon the Second Amendment, then you are either in denial or irreparably stupid. Taking people's guns infringes upon the right of people to own guns. Now, if you are in confusion as to why I listed this law as a violation of the First Amendment, that's more understandable. It warrants further explanation. Consider the following scenario. You post some personal opinions onto an online platform. Take Twitter, for example. Now let's say that some law enforcement officers see your posts and deem your political speech to be too radical. If they so choose, they can petition the court to grant them the authority to legally harass you in your own home and confiscate your property. This undue increase in the powers of law enforcement would have an obvious chilling effect upon the freedom of speech. Now, if you believe this to be far-fetched, consider European countries and their law enforcement mechanisms. It has become a staple of modern European policing to take action against social media users with opinions that run against the ideological goals of those with institutional power, actions ranging from phone calls to check the thinking of citizens who dare to step outside of the allowed ideological plantation, to raids of homes with arrests being made. If you believe that government actors representing the United States would never misuse institutional power to suppress the speech of others, then think again. All you need to do is look to the numerous examples in history in which some Americans attempted to silence others. As of January 18th, Senate Bill 35, 69, and 70 have all been passed by the Senate and await passage through the House of Delegates, and Senate Bill 16 has been replaced by House Bill 961, which attempts to do the exact same thing, criminalize the possession of many semi-automatic rifles. Our new legislature has demonstrated that they have absolutely no regard whatsoever for our civil liberties. Their assaults on our constitutional rights are not slowing down. These people are doing everything in their power to ram these restrictions through. Fellow Virginians, we must exercise every bit of political power that we have left to resist the passage of these new laws. And for those of you listening from outside the Commonwealth, take note of these events. If and when these laws are passed, we must challenge them in court. If our courts are to be considered fit for purpose in any way, they should strike down, at the very least, a significant portion of these laws as unconstitutional. And if they do not, then our Constitution is truly dead, as we will be in the midst of a rogue government that believes itself to be unconstrained in its ability to tyrannize the public.